Hi everyone, and welcome our today's very nice guests. So we have today a multinational paper written by Sébastien Bourdin from Normandie Business School, by Gianluigi Coppola and Sergio Destefanis from Salerno, and also our fellow Maria Kubara, who is not with us today, but she made a huge impact, right, on this paper.
Yes, absolutely.
So, as usual, you guys have around an hour. If you finish early, it's still fine. So, thank you for being with us today, and floor is yours.
Thank you very much for welcoming us in this webinar. So today we're going to present a paper that has been published recently in Regional Studies, and it's all about the EU cohesion policy and how to consider the trade-off between employment and productivity. So basically, I will present the motivation and the literature review dedicated to our topic, and then I will leave the floor to Sergio to present the empirical approach, the methodology, and the main results, and I will conclude. So first, talking about the motivation and the literature review, let's say that in the literature there are plenty of papers that has been published on the impact of EU cohesion policy on regional growth. But those papers are showing that the results are quite mixed, and they are mixed for many reasons. Some colleagues are showing that there is a spatial heterogeneity of this impact due to the quality of institutions and so on and so forth. And others are showing that if we consider the type of and the domains of EU cohesion policy, so investing in infrastructures or education or other domains, then it creates different results. So let's say that the literature is, yes, really mixed. And if you look at more in the details about the literature, most of the time, the variable explained is the regional growth measured by the GDP. And few studies are decomposing the GDP per capita into the GDP per employee and the employment rate. And for our view, it's really important to decompose this GDP per capita because the European cohesion policy has mixed results, and there is a need for analyzing the trade-off. And this trade-off is really important to consider because when it comes to analyze the EU cohesion policy, there are two main funds. The first one is the European Regional Development Fund. And as this fund is supporting the companies and the investment in infrastructures, we can say that these funds are prioritizing the productivity. And then when it comes to the second main fund, the European Social Fund, what we can say is that this fund is promoting mostly the labor market policies, which means that this fund is prioritizing the employment. So different funds and different priorities. And regarding this, the idea of this paper is to decompose this GDP per capita into GDP per employee and employment rate. So regarding the theoretical framework, so far, let's say that there is a lot of literature that has been produced on the trade-off between employment and productivity. But most of this literature is produced by macroeconomists, which means that there is a little of literature on the regional scale that is trying to analyze this trade-off and where policies are both promoting employment and productivity. And let's say that if you look at the two main papers that are trying to decompose this at the regional scale, these papers are showing that there are, let's say, some labor-intensive industries where there is high employment and often lower productivity, while in other regions you have capital-intensive industries where there is a higher productivity but often fewer jobs. And there is here a trade-off, and the idea is to solve this trade-off. So there is a policy conundrum, and Maria Breu said that the labor-intensive policies in developing regions can result in rapid employment, but may hinder productivity growth, contradicting goals of sustainable economic development. So the idea is to find the balance between labor-intensive policies versus capital-intensive policies. So in this context, the EU cohesion policy has to both try to increase the regional growth and increase the regional employment. So this is two different ways, and the road to get to this double goal is not so easy, as some colleagues has already shown. In terms of motivation, what we can also say is that there is a wide literature that has stressed the importance of properly addressing the issue of spatial spillovers, especially when it comes to talk to EU cohesion policy, because one can say that the funds injected in one region can generate spatial spillovers in neighborhood regions. So this is really important to consider the spatial spillovers because it can affect the sign and the magnitude of the effects of the EU cohesion policy across Europe. And what has been shown in this literature is that regions with high productivity may share resources, knowledge, and innovations with neighboring regions, and this can potentially boost both employment and productivity. Also, there is also another main important takeaway from this literature is that the regions with high employment but low productivity may serve as labor pools for more productive neighboring regions. And the sixth motivation is that the literature also suggests that the effectiveness of EU cohesion policy across different regions may be heterogeneous along various dimensions. First, some regions may specialize in high productivity sectors like technology, while others might be focused on labor-intensive industries. And there are a lot of reports from the GRC of the OECD that are really highlighting this. Second, the regions with a highly skilled workforce may experience different trade-offs compared to areas with lower skilled workers, which is an important aspect as well. And finally, the regional policies can either exacerbate or mitigate the employment productivity trade-off depending on the focus. Again, as I mentioned before, if we focus on ERDF, we can expect that it increases the productivity, while when we are focusing on the European Social Fund, it can increase potentially the employment. So taking stock on this overview of the literature, what we can say is that there is room for new studies that take into account first the identification of the role of various EU funds, the separation of GDP per employee and employment rate, because we can ask ourselves if there is a negative relationship seems to exist between these two variables, but are there endogeneity problems? So this is a question that has not been addressed yet. We need also to consider the role of spillovers, and also to consider the fact that there is a spatial heterogeneity of the impact of EU cohesion policy across Europe. And the idea of this paper is to consider those three main aspects. So the idea of the article we published was to undertake an evaluation of the fund's effect comprehensive or spillover effects. So we estimate the impact of cohesion policy funds within a Solovian growth model using a spatial Durbin model. And then we estimate, and this is a new methodology which make also our paper original from this point of view, a multi-input, multi-output distance function, and we jointly consider the impact of policies on GDP per employee and employment rate, which are the two components of the GDP per capita.
Yes. So I'm taking from now. Shall I share the screen and you stop sharing, Sébastien?
Yes, of course. Yeah, okay.
So it's more convenient, I think,
Yeah.
for listeners. Okay. So you should be seeing the methodology slide, isn't it?
Yes.
Good. And so thank you again, Katerina, for the invitation. And methodology. First of all, the regional data set. Sorry?
Can you put it in a small the whole screen maybe?
Presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I'm not so used to Zoom. Okay. So first of all, the regional data set. We have some data from the Ardeco and from Eurostat regional statistics. These are the GDP per capita, population, employment, and investment mainly. Whereas we take advantage of this new data set from the EU Commission, which is the historic EU payments. And this allows us to do something which hasn't been done in many other studies. This allows us to take care of different cohesion funds. And as you see here, we have the cohesion fund, which only goes to some countries which are, I think, below 90% of the average income per capita in the EU. For example, Poland receives the cohesion funds, but Italy doesn't. On the other hand, there is the European Regional Development Fund, which goes mainly, but not fully, to regions that are below 75% of the average income of the EU. And then there is the European Social Fund, which mainly goes to areas which have some problems of employment. So we try to assess the impact of these three forms of EU funding. And we have data for 223 EU regions. We do not consider the UK because some data were not available for the UK after the split, after the Brexit. And these 223 regions also exclude Cyprus, Canary Islands, Azores, and Madeira because they are basically disjointed from the rest of the spatial sample. And it wasn't possible to make any sort of reasonable hypothesis about the kind of spatial connection existing between these regions and the rest of the sample. And these are annual data from 2000 to 2018. Because before 2000, there were no data, mainly for the European Social Fund. Also, the coverage of the cohesion fund is a bit unequal. So starting in 2000 ensures us with some kind of a consistent data set. The methodology. First of all, we could start from a very simple Solovian model. So you have GDP per capita, which is a function of past GDP per capita, of gross fixed investment, private investment over GDP, of the EU funds over GDP, variation of population, and then some terms which are linked to the region fixed effects, time fixed effects. This is something which is very widely used in the literature. Of course, this is not what we want to do because we want to split GDP per capita in its two components, GDP per employee and the employment rate. How do we do it? We thought about that. If we regress GDP per capita on funds and other variables, this could not really represent the impact or the different impact that may occur between GDP per employee and employment rate. But also, if we regress just GDP per employee and employment rate on funds and other variables, we neglect the information. Let's say that we regress GDP per employee over the variables that you have seen before. We would neglect the substitution effect between GDP per employee and employment rate and information content in that. Let's say that we regress GDP per employee on the other variable funds and employment rate. This is not good either, because in that case, we do not take into account, when we have GDP per employee as a dependent variable, we do not take into account the effect of the funds and the other variables on the employment rate. So we need to think about something different. And what we thought is using some kind of multi-input, multi-output transformation function, which is kind of common in the in the literature about the empirical analysis of production. And basically, it can allow us to, this procedure can allow us to take into account more than one output determined by more than one input. And the trick, if you want to say, is that choose either one of these two variables. In this case, it is GDP per employee as dependent variable, but adding at the right-hand side of the equation this term, which is employment rate minus GDP per employee. If we do this, it is as though we are regressing a bundle of goods which contains both GDP per employee and employment rate over the rest of the variables. A linear combination of these two variables. And we could do this thing the other way around. Take here the rate of employment and take here GDP per employee minus the employment rate, and we would get exactly the same results. This is demonstrated by these papers of Coelho, Perelman, Kumbhakar, and other people too. Again, in the literature about the empirical analysis of production, this is kind of staple. And we just applied this to a different field, which is the regional analysis of GDP per employee and employment rate. And obviously, other generalizations of this could be imagined. Provided that the other regressors are exogenous, the presence of this variable among the independent variables is not really a problem, as long as some general conditions are fulfilled. And this is demonstrated in Kumbhakar 2012. There is something more. I told you before that in this case, we are regressing a linear combination of GDP per employee and employment rate over the rest of the variables. Think about an isoquant that shifts in a parallel manner up and down, okay? We may think that if the other variables impact on this isoquant, it shifts out. But does it shift in a parallel manner? In other words, could we think that the European funds and other variables affect these two variables, GDP per employee and employment rate, differently? We can test for that. Obviously, we can think that, and we can test for that. What we do is that we add among the regressors this interaction term between the European funds, which are our variables of interest, and the difference between rate of employment and GDP per employee, which is exactly the same variable that we see here. If this term is significant, there is a bias. There is a bias in the sense that the funds affect more employment rate or GDP per employee. And we can show that if the sign of this A subscript 52 is positive, the funds increase the long run impact, a higher A subscript 52 increases the long run impact of the funds on the employment rate, and there is, on the other hand, a smaller impact of the funds on GDP per employee. Things would go the other way around if here we had, instead of a positive sign, a negative sign. Obviously, there is also the alternative, third alternative of having this coefficient, which is insignificantly different from zero. In this case, the funds equally affect GDP per employee and employment rate. This is the big methodological novelty of the paper, but we also go forward as far as empirical approach is concerned, in the sense that we want to allow for spillovers, for spatial spillovers across regions. And so we estimate a spatial Darwin models where we have these spatial lags that may affect both the regressors and the dependent variables. And this is again kind of a standard technique, but it has never been employed in the study of the relationships between employment rate and GDP per employee at the regional level. The spatial weight matrix is determined according to usual customary methodology in these fields. Here we used a k-nearest criterion, denoting taking a number of neighbors for each region, which is equal to 5. So for each region, we have to find 5 neighbors. And finally, as Sébastien was saying before, there is wide evidence that the effects of the European funds differ across geographical areas within the European Union. And so how do we take into account this possible heterogeneity? Simply by taking some spatial regimes, which are some groups of regions. And we take the core area of the European Union, Austria, Belgium, Germany, Denmark, Finland, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Sweden. And for various reasons, there is also Italy here, although it is not strictly speaking a blue banana core region of the European Union. But certainly northern Italy used to be part of this core region up to a point. Anyway, after this blue banana, this core area, we have Central and Eastern European countries, which of course include Poland, but also Bulgaria, Czechia, Croatia, Hungary, Lithuania, Latvia, Romania, Slovenia, and Slovakia. And then we have the cohesion funds countries. Obviously, all the Central and Eastern European countries also receive the cohesion fund. But by cohesion fund countries here, we mean countries that have received up to a moment or still receiving the cohesion fund, even without being part of the Central and Eastern European area. And this is a first split. So these are 3 special regimes. There is a different split, which can be also a mix of the preceding regions, which basically considers the regions that are in objective 1 area and the regions that are not in objective 1 area, where objective 1, actually, it is what is called nowadays the convergence objective. So for example, I think that in Poland, the region close to Warsaw is no longer in the convergent objective, but the rest of the country, to the best of my understanding, still is. And if you think of Italy, on the other hand, northern Italy is not in the convergence objective, and southern Italy is in the convergence objective. So the main results. The paper is quite wide, and we want to be pretty concise in the presentation of the results. And then maybe if you want to go into deeper detail, we can obviously respond to your question. But basically, what we get is that the cohesion fund has a lot of significance, especially for the lagging regions. So especially in Central and Eastern Europe, and especially in the convergence objective regions, and is biased toward employment. So it favors the growth of employment versus the growth of productivity. In the other regions, obviously, most of the other regions do not receive the cohesion fund. Sorry, I got a problem here with the presentation. Okay. And Obviously, this suggests that there may be a problem in boosting productivity by acting on the cohesion fund. And so whenever we have promoting labor productivity as a big goal of the cohesion policy of the European Union, we may find that there is a problem. What I just said holds mainly true for the direct effect for each region, but by and large is also true for the spillovers. So spillovers of the cohesion fund tend to be in favor of employment versus productivity. On the other hand, the European Regional Development Fund is biased in favor of labor productivity. It is true that this is mainly the objective, the target of this kind of fund, so this comes as no surprise, but certainly it is a potential policy problem because we may enhance productivity but do not generate job opportunities. And this is, of course, linked to the fact that there may be the adoption of more sophisticated techniques, and in the short run, at least, these techniques do not bring about higher employment. What could we do about that? Again, this is true by and large, both for the direct regional effects and for the spillovers. What can we do about that? We could think about something, for example, along the lines of the smart specialization strategy. We did not find in our estimates a very significant and widespread role for the European Social Fund. But in other works that did not take into account this complex two-output framework and this complex spatial framework, in other words, we found that the combination of the European Regional Development Fund and European Social Fund, for example, could have a positive impact on productivity and employment or on GDP per capita. So the idea is that if you are worried about the potential negative outcome of the European Regional Development Fund about overemployment, then you should consider strengthening the smart specialization strategy that mixes the European Regional Development Fund with the European Social Fund. And this is certainly one of our big policy conclusions. So one size does not fit all. We have to tailor cohesion policy and to be aware that cohesion policy may have different impacts and different funds may have different impacts on different regions. And I leave now the floor to Sébastien.
Yeah, just to finish up, yes, what we have demonstrated is that while short-term improvements in productivity may be limited, especially in lagging regions, sustained investment in education, training, and skills development is essential also to foster innovation, adaptability, and growth. So human capital definitely acts as a key enabler for regions to move up the value chain and fully benefit from cohesion policy support. So talking about the smart specialization strategy, as Sergio was saying, so this smart specialization should be more systematically connected to the allocation and evaluation of EU funds. So we definitely need smart specialization strategies that are made more operational and more embedded into territorial governance frameworks, and that are particularly in relation to the employment productivity trade-off. So this is really, really important to consider. And this implies, of course, stronger place-based approaches and greater flexibility in the implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we thank you also for being with us today.